My sister-in-law demanded my husband keep handing his whole paycheck to her family because I had no right to take his money. But their whole lifestyle collapsed when I made him choose me. Before I married Marco, every dollar he earned went to his mother. All of it. Every 2 weeks, the money landed with Carmen, and Carmen decided what Marco was allowed to keep, which was almost nothing. He was 31 years old, and he had to ask his own mother for gas money. I assumed marriage would change that. The person who made sure it did not was his sister, Gina. Gina is 2 years older than Marco. She has 2 kids and a husband named Tony, who has been between jobs for as long as I have known him. She has never held a job herself. She never needed one, because Marco's paycheck covered her rent, her kids' school, and her groceries for years. So when Marco and I got engaged, Gina sat me down at a family dinner and explained how things were going to work. "I know you have your little ideas," she said, "but Marco has responsibilities here. The money still comes to the family. You don't get to marry him and cut us off." I looked at Marco. Marco looked at his plate. That was the first time I understood what I was marrying into. I told her Marco and I would decide together what to do with our own money. She smiled. "Our money," she said. "Cute. That's not your money, honey. That's this family's money. Marco just carries it home." After the wedding, it did not stop. The first payday as a married man, Marco moved to send the whole check to Carmen like always. I asked if we could keep some to start savings. He got a guilty look and said, "If I hold anything back, my mom panics. Just this month. I'll fix it later." He said that every month. Carmen's car needed work. Gina's kids needed uniforms. Tony had a lead on a job that needed gas money to chase. And every month I watched my husband hand over money we needed while his family treated me like a thief for wanting any of it. Gina made sure I knew where I stood. At every dinner, she said it in front of everyone. Some wives support their husband's family, and some wives try to steal a man away from the people who raised him. Carmen nodded along. Tony nodded along, which took some nerve for a man living on my husband's paycheck. When I tried talking to Carmen directly, she patted my hand and said, "You're still young. You'll understand family one day." I understood family fine. This family had found a person who would give them everything and ask for nothing, and they were never going to let go of that on their own. It got worse when I got pregnant. I thought a baby would soften them. Instead, Gina drew up a list, a real list, on paper, of everything Marco's paycheck was supposed to cover every month. Her rent was on it. Her kids' activities were on it. Carmen's spending money was on it. A vacation Gina wanted was on it. Our baby was not. When I pointed out there was nothing on that page for Marco's own child, Gina said, "The baby is your problem. You wanted it. Marco already has a family to take care of." That was the sentence that finally reached him. He had spent his whole life being told that carrying them was love, and it took his sister calling his son a problem for him to hear it. He did not explode. He went quiet for a few days, and then he told his mother that starting that month his paycheck was going to his wife and his child, and that he would help with real emergencies. But the automatic money was finished. You would have thought he had committed a crime. Carmen cried and said he was abandoning her. Gina called me nonstop, not Marco, me, because in her mind I had done this. "You turned him against his own blood," she screamed. I asked what exactly the family had done for him, since he had been paying for all of them for a decade. She hung up. Here is the part they never planned for, and I did not lift a finger to make it happen. That paycheck was the only thing holding any of them up. Gina had never worked because she never had to. Carmen had never saved a dollar because Marco's money always came. Tony had spent years looking for work from a couch that Marco paid for. When the money stopped, there was nothing underneath them. That Carmen could not cover her own bills and gave up the big house she had been living in on Marco's salary. Gina's rent came due with no Marco to send it, so she moved herself and the kids into Carmen's spare room, and Tony finally took a warehouse job, the same work he had turned his nose up at for years. And Gina, the woman who told me a wife does not get to touch the family's money, walked into a store and filled out an application for the first time in her adult life. She was 35 and had never had a paycheck of her own because she had spent 10 years spending her brother's. I heard about all of it secondhand, from Marco, from a cousin, from Tony complaining about his shift. Nobody in that family ever said the obvious thing out loud, which was that none of it was punishment. Nothing had been taken from them. The money had simply stopped arriving, and without it there was no structure at all, because they had never built one. That is the difference between being robbed and being carried. They had been carried so long they had forgotten they had legs. None of them apologized. I mistook the silence for acceptance. Gina was not accepting anything. She was regrouping. She started calling Marco at work during lunch, crying about Angel needing shoes and Janice falling behind, pulling him back one guilt trip at a time, certain I would never find out. But Marco told me. That was new. That was the first time he brought me a problem instead of hiding it. A week later, he came home home, sat at our dining table, and slid his phone across to me. "Look at the call log," he said. Gina's name, over and over. Dozens of missed calls, 5 and 6 a day. A whole column of voicemails. He said, "She left one saying Angel asked why Uncle Marco doesn't love them anymore." He said it flat, like a man who had listened to it more than once and could not get it out of his head. Angel was a kid. Marco loved that kid. He had been more of a father to him than Tony ever was, and Gina knew exactly what that button was worth. I asked to hear it. I put it on speaker. Gina's voice came through shaky and wet. "Marco, please. Angel came to me today and said, 'Why doesn't Uncle Marco love us anymore?' I didn't know what to tell him, and then I heard it. Underneath the crying, faint but clear, the other version of her voice, the coaching version. She had been whispering to Angel before she realized the recording had already started, walking him through his lines. Say you miss Uncle Marco. Say you don't understand why he stopped coming around." I played it twice to be sure, and the second time I turned the volume all the way up and held the phone close, and there was no mistaking it. She had rehearsed a 6-year-old and then cried on top of it. Marco was watching my face. He already knew, but watching me confirm it did something to him. His jaw locked and he looked away. I told him straight, "That is not a little boy who said those words on his own. That is your sister feeding him a script because she knows you can't handle a kid being hurt." Marco put his head in his hands and sat there a long time. Then he said, "I know she's using them, but what if he really did say it?" That crack in his voice was the whole problem. You can see the trap and still feel like you deserve to step in it. I took his hands and said, "If Gina cared about those kids, she would get a job instead of teaching them how to beg." He nodded slow, and we agreed at that table that no money was going back. Not a dollar. Nope. A few days later, the house phone rang while he was in the shower. Carmen. She never came at you like Gina did. Gina was loud and messy. Carmen was calm, controlled, a woman who had practiced in front of a mirror. "I'm not asking for myself," she said, soft, gentle, like she was consoling me. "I'm asking because your niece and nephew are eating rice for dinner every night. Is that who you want to be?" Like I had personally emptied their pantry. I could feel the pull of it, and they were not even my children. Carmen was good, but I had watched her operate long enough. I said, "Tony could feed his own kids if he worked more than 3 days a week." A long pause. Then Carmen said, "Tony is not my son. Marco is. And Marco was raised better than this." That told me everything. She was not worried about rice. She was worried her system was broken and she needed Marco to repair it. Tony had never been held responsible for anything because Tony was not the one sending checks. Marco was the engine, and Carmen wanted the engine back. I said I would let Marco know she called, and I hung up. When he got out, I repeated it word for word, and I watched guilt and sadness and frustration move across his face and land, finally on something that looked like recognition. I sat next to him and said, "They're not asking for help. They're training you back into the old pattern. $1, and we're where we started." Because that was the truth. This was not two people reaching out. This was a team. Gina hit him with the crying and the kids. Carmen came in behind her with the quiet disappointment, the "I raised you better," the weight he had been bending under his entire life. They were not grieving a relationship. They were running a play, and the only thing that had changed was that somebody was finally sitting next to him reading the playbook out loud. Then he surprised me. He said he wanted to set up a fund for Angel and Janice. Not money to Gina, not money to Carmen, money paid directly to the school for supplies and books, straight to the office where Gina could not touch it. I thought it was fair. Those kids did not ask for any of this. So I agreed. He called Gina that evening with me sitting beside him, and I could hear her through the phone. He explained it clearly. An account with the school. Anything the kids needed for class. Gina went quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "School supplies?" Not grateful, not relieved, insulted. "I don't need school supplies. I need the rent, Marco. Stop playing games." And right there she told on herself completely. It was never about Angel asking why his uncle stopped loving him. It was never about rice. It was rent. It was money in her hand that she got to spend however she wanted. Marco did not say another word. He hung up and set the phone face down and did not call back. After that, he stopped looking guilty. He stopped flinching when his phone rang. For the first time, he looked angry at the right people. I thought Gina might back off. Gina does not back off. She had one move left, and it involved putting those children directly in front of him. About a week later, he came home with the face he makes when he wants to ask something I will not like. Mom invited us to Sunday dinner. Just dinner. She promised no drama. Everything in me wanted to refuse, but he said he wanted to prove that cutting off the money did not mean cutting off the people. He said he did not want to lose his mother. So I said okay. Carmen's new apartment was small small, 2 bedrooms, nothing like the house. She opened the door smiling. She hugged Marco. Then she took both my hands and said, "I'm happy about the baby. I really am." And she looked at me when she said it, not through me. Tony stood up when we came in, shook Marco's hand, asked how I was feeling. Gina was not there. Nobody mentioned it. Carmen brought out rice and beans and chicken and a salad and asked about names, and when Marco said Adam, her whole face lit up. 20 minutes of a family talking about a baby. I thought, maybe money was the poison and the water clears without it. Then the front door opened. Gina walked in with Angel and Janice. Angel's jacket was a size too small, and Janice was holding a stuffed animal, and both of them had the serious faces of children who had been told something in the car. Angel broke away and ran straight into Marco's legs and said, "Uncle Marco, Mom said we might have to move. Are we going to be okay?" His voice cracked at the end and the whole room changed. Janice started crying because Angel was crying. Marco looked at me for 1 second and I saw all of it. The guilt, the pain, a man being asked to watch children suffer and do nothing. Gina stood behind them with her arms crossed, leaning in the doorway like she had just delivered a package. I didn't tell them to say that. They're scared. This is what you're doing to them. Carmen started crying. Tony put his head in his hands and slumped like a prop. Marco got down on one knee, took Angel by the shoulders and said, "You are going to be okay. I promise you that." Steady voice, wet eyes. Then Gina leaned over him and said, "Then prove it. Prove it with more than words, Marco." I could feel the machine running at full power, every gear clicking exactly where she wanted it, and I saw the crack starting in his face. So I put my hand on his shoulder and I looked straight at her. "Your children are scared because you told them to be scared. Angel did not come up with 'we might have to move on his own.' You put it in his mouth because you knew Marco couldn't say no to a kid's face." The room went dead. Gina stepped toward me. "How dare you?" I did not step back. 8 months pregnant in my mother-in-law's living room, I said, "Because you are, and everyone here knows it." Carmen stood up, wiped her eyes and said, "That is enough. You are a guest in my home." I said, "And Marco was a guest in his own life for 10 years. We are leaving." I heard his chair move behind me. He said nothing to anyone. He did not apologize or promise to call. He followed me out. In the driveway at home, he finally spoke. "You were right." She put those words in Angel's mouth. Then quieter, I almost broke. That night, he blocked her number. 3 days later, I was alone folding onesies when the doorbell rang. Gina stood on my porch with Angel on one side, Janice on the other, and 2 suitcases behind them on the walkway. Not overnight bags. The big kind. Her eyes were red and her hair was messy and she said, "Mom kicked us out. Tony left. We have nowhere to go. Are you going to turn away 2 children?" She put those last words at the end like a lock on a door. And my first thought was not about the bags. My first thought was that Carmen would never do that. Carmen guilt-tripped. Carmen manipulated. Carmen did not evict. So I said it flat. "Carmen kicked you out." Gina did not blink. She said she can't afford to keep us because you took Marco's money away. Even on my porch begging, still my fault. I said, "Did you call Marco?" Her face tightened. "He blocked me. So I came to you, woman to woman, mother to mother." And she put her hand on Janice's head like a prop. I brought the kids inside and sat them on the couch. And Angel walked in careful, like a boy entering a place he was not sure he was allowed to be. Then I told Gina we needed to talk by the counter. She started her pitch before I said anything. "Just let us stay a week, 2 weeks, until Tony gets his next check." I leaned back and said, "Tony has a check coming?" A pause. Barely a second, but I caught it. "He's at the warehouse now. He gets paid in 2 weeks." So Tony had a job. Tony, who had left. So Gina was not homeless. Gina was inconvenienced. I said, "Then stay with Carmen for 2 weeks." She shook her head fast. "I told you." She kicked me out. I did not argue. I pulled up Carmen's number, hit call, put it on speaker, and set the phone down between us. Gina's eyes went wide. "What are you doing?" It was already ringing. Carmen picked up on the 3rd ring. I said, "Gina is here with the kids and 2 suitcases. She says you kicked her out." A pause. Then Carmen, genuinely confused, the kind you cannot act. "What? I didn't kick anyone out. She left this morning and said she was going to Marco's house to sort things out." I watched the color leave Gina's face. She leaned toward the phone. "Mom, you said you couldn't handle us anymore." Carmen came back quick. "I said it was tight. I didn't say leave. That was it." On speaker, 3 feet away from me, the whole story collapsed. She had packed 2 suitcases, loaded her children, driven to my house, and lied to get through my door. I ended the call and said, "You brought your kids to my door on a lie. You used them as props." Again, her mouth started moving. Some twist, some misunderstanding. I did not let her get there. I said, "You can call a cab, or I can call Marco and play him his mother saying you were never kicked out. Your choice." I said it calm, the way Carmen talks when there is no room to negotiate. Gina stared at me, then turned and told the kids to get their shoes on. Angel got up without a word, like a boy used to being moved without explanation. She loaded the suitcases and buckled them in, and then she stopped in my driveway and turned around. Her voice was not loud. It was empty. You think you won something? You didn't. You just made sure my brother has nobody left. When your marriage falls apart, and it will, he'll have no family to go back to. And that will be on you. She drove off. I locked the door and stood in the hallway with one hand on my stomach, and for the first time in all of it, I was not angry. I was afraid, because that had not sounded like a threat. It had sounded like a prediction. Then Adam kicked, hard, and I remembered I was not fighting to win. I was fighting so my son would have a father who was present instead of drained empty. Marco came home and I told him everything. He said he wanted to end it, all of it, with one conversation. Everyone in one room. No money offered, nothing negotiated, no apology. He wanted to say out loud exactly what he gave and what they took over 10 years. I said, they won't listen. He said, I'm not doing it for them. I need to say it out loud, or I'll carry it forever. So I said I was going with him, and that was not a request. Saturday night, I found him at our dining table with a pen and paper, writing. It was a ledger. 10 years of payments in his careful handwriting. Rent for Gina's apartment, month by month. Car payments for Carmen. Groceries week after week for people who never bought him a meal. School fees, uniforms, activity fees, field trip money for Angel and Janice. A vacation Gina and Tony took 2 summers ago. Flights and hotel and spending money while we stayed home. Gas money for Tony, over and over, for interviews that never turned into jobs. And at the bottom, a total with a line under it. Seeing 10 years as one number made my chest tighten. It was a down payment on a house. It had gone to people who called me a thief. He looked up and said, I never added it up before. His voice was steady. His hands were not. Sunday, Carmen's living room had been rearranged into a circle of chairs, formal, like a courtroom where she was the judge. Gina and Tony were already seated. Angel and Janice were at a neighbor's, and Carmen said, this is not for them. And that was the one thing I ever gave her credit for. Marco unfolded the paper. Before he could speak, Carmen said, warm and gentle, everything I did was because I love you. I raised you to take care of your family. That is not a sin. If I leaned on you too much, I'm sorry. But I will not sit here and be made a villain for loving my son. Perfect. Every pause measured. 10 years of control repackaged as love, and reading numbers out loud would make him look like a man punishing his mother for caring. I felt him pull back. The paper went still in his hands. And then Gina could not help herself. She looked at me, not at him, and smiled. You see, this is what a real family looks like. Forgiveness. Not lists and accusations. You could learn something. In one sentence, she proved the speech was strategy, and she attacked his wife inside it. The guilt drained out of his face like someone pulled a plug. He unfolded the page the rest of the way and read it like a report. No anger, no volume. Rent, month by month. Car payments, groceries, uniforms, the vacation, the gas money. He read that he ate gas station food most days because nothing was left after the check went out. He read that he wore shoes with holes in them for 2 months because Gina's kids needed new ones, and his mother said the children come first. When he reached the total, he read it and let it sit. Carmen was crying. Tony stared at the carpet. Gina's smile was gone and her face had nothing in it. Marco folded the paper and set it on his knee. I'm not angry at any of you. I'm angry at myself for not stopping sooner, but I'm stopping now. My wife and my son are my family. You are my relatives and I love you, but you are not my responsibility. Gina stood, chair scraping. You're going to regret this. When she leaves you, you'll come crawling back, and I'll remind you of this day. Marco looked up at her from his seat. You spent 10 years living on my paycheck and never once said thank you. Now you're threatening me for stopping. That's not family. That's a business arrangement, and I'm closing the account. The sound Gina made was not a word. Marco stood. Carmen said, Marco, please. 2 words, small, the softest thing I ever heard from her. He walked over, leaned down, kissed her forehead, and said, I love you, Mom, but I'll never go back to being who I was. Call me when you're ready to know who I am now. We walked out. In the car, his hands shook on the wheel, but his grip on mine was firm. That's the first time I ever felt like a grown man. 2 weeks later, Adam was born, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and Marco held him and sobbed. Carmen called the next day. She did not ask about money. She asked to see her grandson, and he said yes. Gina never called. Adam sleeps in the crib we built on the floor ourselves. The folded ledger sits in the drawer beside it.